Let's talk about Jeff Martin. Because honestly, there's nobody quite like him. If you've ever heard his voice, you know what I mean. It's hypnotic. It's soothing and terrifying at the same time. And once you've heard a Tea Party song, you just know. Nobody else sounds like that. So here's where it starts. Jeff Martin was born Jeffrey Scott Brill on October 2, 1969, in Windsor, Ontario. Eventually, he changed his last name to Martin. But from the beginning, he was all Canadian. Windsor raised, Detroit influenced, and shaped by a working-class world where music wasn't something you studied in theory. It was something you lived. Jeff grew up with music in his blood. His dad was a bass player, and Jeff would tag along to Detroit, sitting in blues clubs when most kids his age were still trying to figure out how to tie their shoes. He soaked up the sound of raw, live blues and soul. Not from records, but from real people in real rooms. And that early exposure gave him this ear, this ability to feel music in a way that was way beyond his years. By the time he was 11, he was already writing and performing. But this wasn't your average, hey look, the kid can play a chord kind of thing. Jeff had perfect pitch. He had synesthesia. He could literally see music as colors. He wasn't just jamming. He was composing, chasing sounds most adults wouldn't even hear. That kind of creative obsession? That was baked in early. He went to Sandwich Secondary School in Windsor, and that's where he met the guys who would later form the Tea Party with him, Jeff Burrows and Stuart Chatwood. They all graduated together in '88, started jamming in local bands like the Stickmen, and went on to the University of Windsor. Jeff started studying music there, but he didn't last long. He clashed with a professor, walked away from the program, and decided he'd figure it out on his own, which, if you've followed his career at all, that tracks. Jeff Martin has never been one to play by someone else's rules. What makes his sound so distinct is the collision of everything he absorbed growing up, gritty Detroit blues, the ambient mood of classic rock, and a deep fascination with Middle Eastern and Indian music. He once said that when he first heard Within You Without You on Sgt. Pepper's, it felt like he had played it in another life. That's how deep the resonance was. He didn't just like that kind of music, it felt like home. So in 1990, Martin, Chatwood, and Burrows officially formed the Tea Party after a monster jam session at Cherry Beach Rehearsal Studios in Toronto. That was the moment they clicked, and the sound came together, moody, layered, spiritual, and heavy as hell. Their first album was totally DIY. They pressed 30,500 copies of their self-titled debut in 1991 under their own label, Eternal Discs, and sold out in Ontario alone. No radio hit. No fancy promo, just word of mouth, indie fans, and the buzz around their live shows. But even then, they struggled. Jeff Burrows said that even with the demo out, they couldn't book a gig in their own town. So, they did what they do best. They played. Impromptu acoustic set at a local bar, left jaws on the floor, and caught the attention of a local music journalist. That write-up sparked more attention, and suddenly record labels started sniffing around. Here's the thing though. Jeff Martin insisted on producing the band's albums himself. He didn't want outside hands touching the sound. Most labels backed off. But EMI Canada saw something in them and took the gamble. That gamble paid off. In 1993, they dropped their first major label album, Splendor Solis. Jeff Martin produced it, just like he said he would. It went platinum in Canada. The River and Saved Me hit rock radio and much music like a storm. It was this mix of poetic depth, blues fuzz, and mystic rock energy that nobody else was doing. And Save Me? That song was actually written before the album, back in 1991. Jeff has said it was an apology to women, a reflection on how men treat them. That honesty gave it weight. The video, shot in Toronto by Florence Sigismondi, had this eerie, surreal vibe that matched the song perfectly. Live, the band would sometimes segue from Save Me into Daniel Lanois the Maker or Hendrix's Third Stone from the Sun. That's the kind of artistry we're talking about. Raw emotion fused with spiritual weight and musical mastery. That breakthrough kicked open international doors too. Save Me got airplay in Australia on Triple J, and the band started building a following overseas. But it was their next album, The Edges of Twilight in 1995, that really solidified who they were. That record went double platinum in Canada. It was dark, cinematic, and packed with world instruments. Sitar, sarod, harmonium, dumbek. Tracks like Sister Awake in the Bazaar felt like you were walking through a temple and a thunderstorm at the same time. They called their sound Moroccan roll, half joke, half totally accurate. But by 1997, with Transmission, things got darker. The sound shifted toward industrial. Think 9-Inch Nails meets Eastern mysticism. They were frustrated with the industry, feeling boxed in and under-supported. And that tension showed up in the music. It was heavier, angrier, but still unmistakably them. Despite their massive success in Canada and growing popularity in places like Australia and Europe, the US, market never fully caught on. Their sound didn't fit into neat marketing boxes. It wasn't grunge. It wasn't classic rock. It was this other thing, genre fluid, complex, spiritual. And the industry didn't know what to do with that. Still, they pushed on. In 1999, Triptych came out, and that album felt like a blend of everything they'd done up to that point. World music, rock, electronics, orchestral arrangements. It was refined and confident. Heaven Coming Down went to Noah 1 on Canadian radio, and the band kept riding that wave into the early 2000s. But the grind started to wear them down. The creative spark dimmed, the pressure piled up. And in 2005, Jeff Martin stepped away from the band. He moved overseas, spent time in Ireland, Egypt, Australia, trying to reconnect with his voice creatively and spiritually, and you can hear it in his solo work. He leaned into desert blues, performed solo acoustic shows that were still somehow loud as hell, and embraced this modern-day troubadour persona. Bearded, long-haired, and soaked in that mystic energy, the band reunited in 2011, and since then they've settled into something really cool. They're no longer the theatrical mystics with incense and candlelight. They've become elder statesmen of Canadian rock. Refined, grounded, still poetic, still powerful. Jeff Martin now carries himself like a rock frontman who's walked through the fire and come out the other side with something to say. Throughout their career, the Tea Party racked up 13 Juno nominations, Best Rock Album, Group of the Year, Best Single, you name it. They never won a competitive Juno, but they did clean up at the Much Music Video Awards, especially in the 90s. The River and the Bazaar both picked up People's Choice Awards. And fun fact, Stuart Chatwood even won a Juno in 2001 for Best Album Design on their compilation album Tangents. Their discography is diverse, ambitious, and holds up to this day. Whether it's the bluesy rawness of Splendor Solis, the cinematic rituals of Edges of Twilight, the dystopian tech-noir of Transmission, or the mature polish of Triptych, they never stopped evolving. And that's what makes Jeff Martin and the Tea Party so fascinating to me. It all started with that voice. Deep, hypnotic, otherworldly. But the more I learned, the more I realized they weren't just another rock band. They were, and still are, something different. A little heavier, a little deeper, a little louder, and a lot more timeless.